Hey guys, Risensy here, welcome back. In this video I want to talk about the cast node, how it works, what it is for, and where and how to use it. This node is part of the blueprint communication topic. Before we begin, I want to point out that the topic of blueprint communication requires an understanding of object-oriented programming, just like the rest of the Unreal Engine. In any case, I will do my best to explain it as simply and clearly as possible. So let's start. Here is the cast node. It is used for casting. What is casting? It is a process of checking whether an object belongs to a specific class and obtaining a reference to that class. Why is casting needed? Casting is needed for interaction between blueprints, to call functions and modify variables in another blueprint. Casting can be successful or unsuccessful. If the object you pass to the cast node belongs to the class specified in cast, the cast will succeed. You will be able to call functions and modify variables of that object. If the object you pass to the cast node does not belong to the class specified in cast, the cast will fail, and execution will proceed to the cast failed branch. In this case, you will not be able to call functions or modify variables of that object through this cast. To put it simply, you can think of cast like this. Where to use cast? So use cast when you need to access all the functionality of an object, such as variables or functions. When to use cast? The first case is when I need to access a function or a variable and the log has already been defined in the parent class. I have a player, a third-person character, and I need to change its speed. The player class inherits from character. The parent class has a character movement component. In that case, I can cast to character, get the character movement component, and change the speed. Why do it this way? Because I don't need to access all of my player's functionality. I don't need it. The parent class of my player from which it inherits already has the functionality I need. This solves my problem of changing the player's speed and avoids creating unnecessary hard reference. The second case is when a method in the parent class isn't declared, but I expect that class to be loaded. In that case, I cast it to my class and call the event I need. Why is this so? Because the required function isn't declared in the parent class and nothing prevents me from simply casting to the class I need. This won't force my player class to be loaded into memory again, because it is already used in the level and loaded. If you can edit the parent class, you can define a function and variable there. This is useful if the class isn't expected to be loaded. You also avoid creating unnecessary hard reference and loading unnecessary data into memory. How cast works. So now we know a lot, but let's take a moment to look at how cast works. We know that cast works as follows. Select the class whose information you want to get and pass a reference to the object. Cast will check whether this object is an instance of that class. If the check is successful, you'll get access to all that object functionality, its functions, variables, and other data. At the same time, a hard reference is created between the blueprint from which the cast was performed and the class to which it was cast. This means there's a dependency between them. So what does this happen? You remember the statement that cast allows you to access the object's full functionality. The key phrase is the object's full functionality. In order to access the object's full functionality, Unreal Engine must load it into memory. But as we know, if an object already exists in the world, it means it is already loaded into memory and will not be loaded again. So everything is okay, but be careful with this. Even if the reference to an object in cast is null, and there are no instances of that class in the world, the mere fact that cast is used creates a hard reference. Because of this, Unreal Engine will be forced to load that class into memory. So let's move to practical example. So the task is simple. I have a blueprint for a player class and a trigger zone. I want this event to be triggered in the player when the player overlaps the trigger zone. I think I need to create interactions between blueprints. I have this box component inside my trigger zone. It has an event that triggers when the component starts to overlap. And this event has an output pin that returns a reference to the actor with which the overlap occurred. So in that case, I can simply add a cast node to my player class and trigger this event from the player. In the object pin, I'll connect the other actor from the onComponent begin overlap event. And if the object in the cast node turns out to be an instance of my player class, then the cast will succeed and the event will be triggered. So why did I choose casting? Because it works well for the cases I mentioned. I needed to trigger an event from my player when the zone trigger overlaps. I added this event myself to the player class. It is not in the parent class, and it is assumed that my player class will always be loaded at this level, so I can safely use cast. Let me explain this again. I'm using cast here because I need to access an event that exists only in my player class. By using cast, I verify that the object that triggered the event is indeed my player, and then I call the necessary event. In this case, cast is a good solution because the trigger needs to work directly with the player, and the relationship between them is part of the game logic. Let's summarize. Today we explored cast and casting. Casting allows you to check an object's type and access the functionality of the desired class, making it one of the primary methods for blueprint-to-blueprint communication in Unreal Engine. It is important to remember that cast is not a bad tool or a good one. It is just a tool. Use it where it truly solves the problem, and avoid it where there are more suitable solutions. You wouldn't use ibuprofen to treat every illness, right? See you soon, my friends.